Internet mysteries explained in less than a minute. This man, or have you seen this man? This story begins in New York, where a woman with problems had a psychologist illustrate a picture of what is a man that she was dreaming about. After workdays, he was told that other patients had also seen this man on their dreams. So the psychologist printed more papers and pasted them with help of partners all around the world, asking people if they had seen this man. A few days passed, and most of them answer with a yes, that they in fact seen him in their dreams. Nobody knew who he was or why people were dreaming with him. Till this day, it remains an unsolved mystery.
Oh! The curtain moved!
No, it did.
Yeah, it did. It moved. It moved. It moved. Yes, it did.
Why would
It did.
move?
How do you not see that? Oh, okay.
Oh my god.
Oh!
A curtain moves on its own, and a cane falls to the floor almost as if it was pushed. The three medical students are completely freaked out and just run right out of there. So, are the stories true? And is the old emergency room haunted by the spirits of former patients? Let me know what you think.
If you see this woman in the red dress on a rainy night, just run. According to the story, she is a ghost that shows up on quiet roads when it's raining heavily. She wears a bright red dress and has long black hair that covers part of her face. One rainy night, a young woman named Anna was walking home alone after work. The streets were quiet, except for the sound of rain hitting her umbrella. As she walked under a dim street lamp, she saw a woman in a red dress standing in the shadows with her head tilted down. Anna felt nervous, but decided to keep walking. Just as she passed, the woman softly asked, "Where are you going?" Surprised, Anna turned to answer, but the woman's face was hidden by her wet hair. Feeling cold and scared, Anna started walking faster. After a while, she looked back and saw the woman much closer, standing still in the middle of the road. Terrified, Anna began to run. When she reached her building and looked back, the woman was gone. That night, Anna couldn't sleep, haunted by the ghostly voice. This story is from China. Comment your country, and I will share a story from there.
Urban Legends That Ended Up Being Real, Part 16. Bus to Nowhere. This bus has been spotted in Philadelphia. This mysterious bus is said to appear late at night, offering passage to those who are lost, desperate, or at a crossroads in their lives. But once you board, you are no longer in control of your journey, and there is no telling when or if you will be allowed to leave. One of the most chilling encounters occurred when a man named David was wandering the streets of Philadelphia late one night. He was consumed by despair after losing his job and facing eviction. As he walked aimlessly, he saw an old, worn-out bus pulling up to the curb. Its destination sign was blank, and the bus emitted an eerie bluish glow. Feeling a strange compulsion, David stepped aboard. Inside, he found the seats occupied by silent passengers, each staring straight ahead, their faces pale and expressionless. He took a seat at the back, and the bus began to move. The ride seemed endless, winding through unfamiliar streets and shadowy alleys. Hours passed, or perhaps it was only minutes. Time had become meaningless. David felt a sense of calm wash over him, but it was mixed with a growing unease. When he finally asked the driver where they were headed, the man turned slowly, revealing empty, hollow eyes beneath the brim of his cap. Panicking, David leapt from his seat and pounded on the door. The driver said nothing, but the bus stopped and the doors creaked open. David stumbled out, finding himself back in the same spot where he'd boarded. The bus vanished into the night, leaving him shaken and forever changed.
A girl named Valerie posted this terrifying clip on May 12, 2024. Reportedly, she awoke at around 4 a.m. to strange rustling and movement noises outside of her home. Spooked, she immediately checked the security cameras, and what she saw would haunt her for the rest of her life. A skinny, pale, humanoid creature crawls up the driveway. The way it crawls is so unnatural. It looks to be a woman-like figure, but it's extremely emaciated and naked. And look at its torso here, certainly too skinny to be a person. Valerie, shocked and horrified, she contacted the police. to which they alerted all the residents in the area to be on high alert and keep their doors locked at all times. Because who knows who or what this was. What makes this footage especially convincing is that Valerie doesn't upload anything scary on her TikTok page. This is her only video that she has ever uploaded like this, which shows us she wasn't looking for fame and that the clip is more than likely authentic. One of the leading theories in the comments was that the creature was a skinwalker, an evil witch spirit trying to disguise itself as a human to blend in. Or perhaps it's a different creature entirely.
What would you do if someone said this to you? Once there was a girl in Korea who got in an elevator in the apartment building that she was living in when a stranger came in and told her something that was absolutely terrifying. This stranger came into the elevator with her and tried to make some small talk. He looked at the elevator buttons and said, "Oh, I see that you live on the 14th floor. I live on the 13th floor." She gave him a friendly response and even tried to flirt a little bit. She thought that he was attractive and wondered if they would get to know each other better. But things quickly took a horrifying turn. When the elevator arrived at the 13th floor, the man got off and said, "See you soon." But as the doors closed, he pulled out a knife from his jacket and with a terrifying smile said, "Upstairs." Then he ran towards the stairs. By this time, it was too late. The elevator doors were already closed. She tried to push as many buttons as possible, but it was of no use. She was stuck inside the elevator, unable to do anything, as the elevator made its way up to the 14th floor.
In 1995, Robert Overtaker wanted to raise awareness for homelessness with a stunt that would grab the world's attention. His plan was to ride a jet ski straight over Niagara Falls and parachute safely down. On October 1st, 1995, Robert mounted his jet ski and powered through the waters above Niagara Falls. His goal set and adrenaline pumping. Spectators watched in anticipation, unaware of the tragedy that was about to unfold. As he approached the edge, Robert launched himself and the jet ski over the roaring falls. But as he plummeted downwards, disaster struck. His parachute failed to open. Without the parachute, he was helpless against the pull of gravity. He crashed into the freezing waters below. The impact was brutal. His body was tossed like a rag doll, violently thrashing against the raging current, limbs twisting unnaturally. Minutes felt like hours as the rescue team scrambled to find him. When they finally located his lifeless body, it was a grim sight. His face was unrecognizable, battered, and bruised from the crushing fall. His limbs contorted in unnatural positions. And his jet ski bobbed lifelessly on the surface, a haunting reminder of the stunt that went horribly wrong.
What's the scariest story you've ever heard? This is Rhoda Derry, but before she looked like this, she looked like this. As you can tell, she was an incredibly beautiful woman. Rhoda was born on October 10th of 1840 to her 7 older siblings and her parents in Indiana. It is believed that her family was considerably wealthy. As Rhoda grew older, she fell in love with the boy next door. They were farmers that farmed right next to them, and she fell in love with this boy. His name was Charles. But Charles's parents did not agree with this relationship. The reason they didn't agree with this relationship was because it had been rumored that Rhoda's family was involved in witchcraft. This was a rumor that had plagued the family. They said that her grandmother was a witch, and so Charles's mother did not want him to marry Rhoda. It got to the point where Charles's mother finally approached Rhoda and said that if they went ahead with the marriage, that she would curse Rhoda. Suddenly, Rhoda became inconsolable, I guess you could say, and she even started having episodes of being pushed against a wall by an unseen force. This is according to records, of course. But she also grew violent and had a violent temper. It got to the point where her parents would take her to a mental health facility, but they would deem her uncurable and send her back to her parents. Rhoda would then go on to go to another mental health facility, and it was known to not treat its patients humanely there. Rhoda began exhibiting violent behavior, and she even would scratch out her own eyes and punch all of her own teeth out. She was also kept in a wooden box, and she would lay in there naked. It is said that it would fill up with her own fecal matter, and mice would lay nests around her, but she was constantly moving, so she always had bruises all over her body. And since Rhoda wasn't walking, she would eventually lose the ability to walk, and she wouldn't be able to use her legs, so she would just crawl around. Now, there was one article that said in 1906 she had a severe epileptic attack that caused her to burst out in violence, and the people at the hospital, or the nurses, were just sick of it and they slit her throat. It is said that a couple years later nurses would admit to doing this, but there's also articles that say that she was finally taken care of by a different doctor who believed in treating his patients humanely, and that she would eventually get to a point where she was given a bath daily and would lay in a real bed. But people who visit Rhoda's grave say that they can feel someone tugging at their legs, and maybe Rhoda is still there. Either way, this is a tragic tale, and it is a reminder to take care of your mental health and to treat everyone with kindness and respect. What are your thoughts on this? Let me know down in the comments and follow for more strange history.
I was alone with my doll and I was bored, so I did a staring contest. But I quickly ran outside because I won. No thank you. I was bored, so I played rock, paper, scissors with my reflection in the mirror. Something wasn't right because my reflection won. Fuck no. I woke up and looked at the time. It was 7 a.m. and I felt someone scratching my back. Then I woke up. It was just a dream, I thought. I looked at the time, 6:59, and I heard the closet door opening. My 8-year-old child always came into my room at night and said, "Mommy, it hurts." Those are the exact same words she said while I skinned her. What the fuck? Every night my dog scratches at my door. One night I got sick of it and threw a pillow at the door. My dog was next to me. My brother lived in our basement since we had no spare rooms, so hearing him whispering to his online friends was normal as he didn't want to wake us. But ever since he moved out, the whispers get louder and closer. As I woke up in the middle of the night, I heard Alexa speak. "Okay, the security alarms have been disabled." Bitch, what? What?
The police received a report of a man buried in the valley. When they arrived, everyone was shocked. That day, a 911 operator answered a chilling call for help. A woman, sobbing on the other end, begged the police to hurry to a remote valley, claiming her husband had been buried there and that every second counted. Alarmed, the operator alerted the authorities, and soon several officers, along with the woman, arrived at the scene. The valley appeared quiet and undisturbed. Officers spread out, carefully inspecting every possible trace. The flat ground showed no obvious disturbances. With each passing moment, tension rose and hope began to wane. As they searched, one officer spotted a patch of loose soil and immediately called the others over. With shovels in hand, they began to dig what was buried there, if anything, uncertain of what they might find. Then, finally, something began to emerge from the soil. What they uncovered was so shocking that it left even the most seasoned officers stunned, standing in disbelief as the chilling truth of the woman's call was revealed before them. Want to know what happens next? Stay tuned for part 2.
True creepy story time. So sometime in the 1970s, my aunt was living in the Philippines and she got a call from her niece's school. They told her that she needed to come right away because she was acting very strange. And so my aunt went and she went to the principal's office and everybody was on one side of the room, and then her niece was sitting on the other side, completely motionless and silent in a chair. And my aunt was like, "What the hell is going on?" And when she tried to go up to talk to her, the other people pulled her back and they're like, no, don't go near her. Apparently her niece had been acting really strangely all day, and so they wrangled her and put her in this chair, and she'd been sitting there since. So my aunt is no stranger to the supernatural, and she sensed something very paranormal was going on, and so she suggested that they call the town sheriff, who also happened to be an albulario, which is a folk healer. So the town sheriff comes and he approaches the girl and, he tries to talk to her, and then my aunt says that her niece began to talk in a voice that was cold, dark, and not hers.
"She hurt my children. She stepped on my house."
And the town sheriff was like, "What do you mean she stepped on your house? Where is your house?" And then the girl pointed to the outside of the school, and that's when the town sheriff realized what was going on. She had been possessed by a duende, which is a creature in Filipino folklore. They live underneath the ground and particularly in anthills. And right outside of the school is a ton of anthills. And so the town sheriff thinks that the girl was running a little bit recklessly and she might have stepped on one of the duende's homes. So the sheriff asked the duende inside of the girl, what can we do to make things right? And she told them to bring oranges and salt to her home. So that's what they did. They bought those items, they placed them around the anthills, and then they went back to check on the girl. And if you want to hear if things turned out okay, you can hear the full story and more details about it on the latest episode of Stories of Sapphire.
Years ago, I stayed at my aunt and uncle's hotel in Scotland. It was an old, grand building, sitting alone on the edge of a dark forest. The hotel had many rooms, and each one seemed to whisper its own secrets. The walls were thick with history, and the air always felt a bit cool, even in summer. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. A loud banging noise echoed through the halls. It sounded like someone was knocking hard on a door or hitting something heavy. At first, I thought it was a dream, but the banging continued, growing louder and more urgent. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. The room was dark, and the only light came from the moon peeking through the heavy curtains. I listened closely, hoping the noise would stop, but it didn't. The banging kept going, steady and relentless. I decided to find out what was making the noise. I grabbed my flashlight from the bedside table and slowly opened my door. The hallway was empty, and the hotel was silent except for the banging sound. I took a deep breath and stepped into the hall, my flashlight casting long shadows on the walls. The noise seemed to come from upstairs. I walked quietly, my footsteps barely making a sound on the old carpet. As I reached the bottom of the grand staircase, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A shadowy figure stood at the top of the stairs. It was strange, both solid and translucent at the same time. The figure was tall and seemed to shimmer in the dim light. It moved slowly, almost floating, as it began to walk down the stairs toward me. Fear gripped me. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were glued to the floor. The figure moved closer, and I could hear its footsteps now, a soft, eerie sound that echoed in the quiet hotel. Finally, my fear broke through, and I turned and ran back to my room as fast as I could. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands shaking. I jumped into bed and pulled the covers over my head, trying to block out the world, but I could still hear the footsteps. They were slow and steady, moving up and down the hallway outside my room. The night seemed to stretch on forever. I lay in bed, too scared to sleep, listening to the ghostly footsteps. Sometimes they were close, right outside my door, and other times they faded into the distance. But they never stopped. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains, the footsteps finally ceased. I stayed in bed, too frightened to move, until the sun was fully up and the hotel came to life with the sounds of guests and staff starting their day. When I finally dared to leave my room, I found my aunt and uncle in the dining room, serving breakfast to the guests. I wanted to tell them about the figure and the footsteps, but I was afraid they wouldn't believe me or think I was just imagining things. So I kept it to myself. That day, I explored the hotel, trying to find any explanation for what I had seen and heard. I asked the staff if they had heard anything unusual during the night, but they all shook their heads. No one else had heard the banging or the footsteps. Over the next few nights, I stayed awake, listening for any signs of the figure. But the hotel was quiet, and I never heard the footsteps again. The experience left me shaken, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen something otherworldly. Even now, years later, I can still remember that night vividly. The shadowy figure, the eerie footsteps, and the cold fear that gripped me. My aunt and uncle's hotel remains a beautiful and mysterious place, but I always wonder about the secrets it holds and the spirits that might still walk its halls. When I visit the hotel now, I can't help but glance at the staircase, half expecting to see that shadowy figure again. And sometimes, late at night, I think I can still hear the faint sound of footsteps echoing in the quiet corridors, a reminder of that terrifying night years ago.
Back in 2018, I was working at home on a paper I needed to finish for work and was trying to get it done so I could enjoy my weekend without having to worry about it. It was probably somewhere around 10 at this point, but I'd been working in my office for a good 3 hours. This was after a full day already too, so I was getting pretty exhausted. I kept finding myself getting distracted or losing focus, so I paused what I was doing and stood up to stretch my legs and try to wake myself up. I paced around the room a bit, but as I passed by the wall opposite of my desk, I noticed something move in the window. I stopped and did a double take, looking out the window again. I was on the second story of my house, but the window has a view of the front portion of the property by the garage and porch. At first, I didn't see anything and thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but then I saw a bit of movement again. It was a shadow hovering over the sidewalk leading up to the porch. Someone was standing outside the front door, or at least that's what it looked like from the shadow. After looking out the window for a couple minutes and seeing the shadow barely move, I left my office and went downstairs. I leaned on the front door and looked out the peephole. There was a man, looking about 40 years old and bald, with a scruffy gray beard. I watched for a moment. He never knocked or rang the doorbell or made any noise at all. He just stood there. What started freaking me out more was that I didn't know how long he'd been there for, since I was working and never noticed him until just a couple minutes ago. Wanting some answers to why the man was here, I opened the door. Immediately, I was taken aback because the man didn't even flinch. His face stayed the same, being cold and lacking emotion. "What are you doing here?" I said in a stern tone. The man continued to look at me, but didn't answer. Then his eyes moved past me and looked down the hallway in my home. I moved the door further in toward my body to hide the view. "I don't know why you're here, but you need to leave," I said, closing the door firmly. His strange behavior was both creepy and aggravating. Him ignoring me and just standing there made me really frustrated. But then I heard his footsteps begin walking off the porch and away from the house. I sighed in relief and checked to be sure he'd gone away, then went back up to my office. Trying to forget about the man and focus back on my work, I continued where I left off. About 5 minutes later, and just as I was beginning to really start working, a sudden knock echoed through the house. It was from the front door, but the knocks were loud, like someone banging on the door with their whole fist. Irritated, I got up and quickly ran down to the front door, swinging it open aggressively with the intent to yell at the man. But when I saw him, I quickly changed my mind. Something about the look in his eyes and the way he was standing instantly shifted my anger into fear. I looked down at his hands, seeing him holding something to his side, like he was trying to conceal it from me. All I could make out was the top of a small handle, resembling that of a knife. I looked back up at him, only to see his whole body jolt toward me. I jumped back and slammed the door shut, then fought to lock it as the man was trying to turn the handle from the other side. Once I got the handle and the bolt lock latched, the man started banging on the door again for several seconds before running away. I stood there with barely any breath in me, feeling my adrenaline still surging through my body. Shakily, I went to the office and called 911. The man was never seen after that, and no real answers to what happened that night were ever found.